Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bella Gamer, and today we're going to be talking about Starfinder 2E's playtest that's come out. And I gotta say, this book is massive. 226 pages. That's a whole book. That's pretty much the whole thing. Now, I have to say, this is a playtest, so everything we're going to be seeing in here might not be what comes out in the final release that comes out a year from now. Next Gen Con, exactly, is when the Starfinder 2E is going to officially release with their full book. So I'm going to talk to you all today about some of the differences between it and Pathfinder, some of the similarities between it and Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and what you all can expect going forward with this particular playtest. Now, I do have to state, Paizo did send me a copy of the playtest for free as a PDF for review purposes, but this is not a sponsored video, so all thoughts and opinions here are my own. And second disclaimer, because one is not enough apparently, I have not played a lot of Starfinder 1st Edition. I dabbled with it a little bit. We played it here on the channel for like a one-shot, and I'm somewhat familiar with Pathfinder 1st Edition, which it was kind of based on. So I'm not going to be super knowledgeable when it comes to many of the differences between Starfinder 1st and 2nd Edition. This is the only thing I know is Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So that's what we're going to kind of be relating it to. And I got to say, I'm super stoked. So first and foremost, let's talk about one of the biggest things that was in Starfinder 1st Edition was the alien races, now the alien ancestries. And they are still going to be a pretty big part of the game. I don't know if we're going to have nearly as many as we originally did, but we definitely are going to be having some weird alien ancestries. As the Barathu is a really good example, you can see here, you get to play just a flying jellyfish creature. Now, there was a little bit of a misprint in the original PDF. The Barathu do not have a 20 land speed and 25 fly speed. They have a 5 land speed and a 20 fly speed, which is crazy. So we just have ancestries that have flight out the gate, and a 20-foot flight at that, which is pretty substantial. In addition to this, we're also going to have other ancestries that have multiple arms. The Kasatha, for instance, have 4 arms, and the lovable Skittermanders have 6. Now, what does that mean? What does that multiple arms mean for a Pathfinder 2E related game? Well, they actually solve this in one particularly interesting way. So, at any one time, your character is going to have a set of active arms, more or less. They have a whole they have a whole panel dedicated just to this. And you can switch which active arms you're using as a singular action. There are some ancestry that can get even more arms through picking up ancestry feats. So this is a very interesting change from Pathfinder 2nd Edition, where the number of arms our characters have is a pretty regimented thing. There's this whole like swapping weapons action, and it's kind of a pain in the butt. So in Starfinder 2nd Edition, I know some people haven't been super happy with this particular change, but it does keep more in line with the game's sense of balance, and it is technically very powerful. You can go swapping from a 2-handed weapon to 2 one-handed weapons, essentially, for a singular action, which in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, I think you would have to do like 2 actions minimum to do the same kind of thing. So we already have ancestries that have flight and multiple arms, so they can use multiple weapon sets with just a singular action, which is pretty cool. Now, this might seem like it kind of breaks the idea of Pathfinder. Pathfinder is very restrictive when it comes to things like flight and multiple arms, and, well, flight is not really much of an issue when it comes to Starfinder 2nd Edition, as they've added guns, and like a lot of guns, and guns are pretty insane. Now, this is going to be a little bit more micromanagey than we are used to before. Guns do have magazine sizes, so you do have to keep track of your ammo, and they also have an expend trait that you can see here that that includes an amount that is used every time the gun is fired. So, if a gun has a magazine size of 10, for instance, and an expend of 2, you can fire that 5 times before the gun runs out of ammo, and then you need to use the reload action. Now, you can also see some other interesting traits here, like the fact that many of these guns have area damage. One of the big things with Starfinder 2nd Edition are big bulky guns that have area damage, either with an area fire or auto fire 2 action ability. You essentially can hit all enemies within a cone, line, blast, whatever the weapon has in particular, meaning you can spray and pray the enemies. Now, they do take your weapon's damage based on a basic reflex saving throw, which does mean that things like flight are just not as big anymore, because a lot of enemies are going to be assumed to have some kind of ranged ability or gun, or, mostly guns. Actually, lots and lots of guns. Guns are a really big part of this one. Now, weapons also have upgrade slots, which are essentially our rune slots. And as well, you can get upgraded versions of the weapons that give them a higher to hit, which is the tracking, more upgrade slots, up to 4 maximum, which is pretty cool. And of course, increasing the weapon's base damage die amount by an amount indicated here. So we overall have a much heavier, it's Pathfinder with guns is essentially what Starfinder 2E is. We have a lot of cool new ancestries that can do some cool new things because the firepower on the battlefield has increased. And speaking on increased firepower, we do have these 6 classes included here in the playtest that will be moving forward to the full release next year, with 2 more, the Technomancer and the Machinist, that are going to be coming out in a book in the following year, 2026. So real quick, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of each of the classes, but expect a video coming out on these a little bit later, as I'm going to be covering some of my favorites that are interesting, like the Solarian, which is one I'm very excited for. And as well, something I need to state, these are just different classes. These aren't, what's a fighter in space? No, the soldier is an incredibly different class than the fighter, and that is true for most of these. They have new, interesting mechanics that you can utilize and are all incredibly fun. So starting off with the Envoy is definitely an interesting one. It's a charisma-based leader class that has really good abilities. One of their base abilities is Get 'em. You target a single enemy, you reduce its AC by 1, no save, nothing. If you hit it, you deal extra damage, and your allies will do additional damage to that enemy as well, which is incredibly powerful. Also, somewhat similar to an investigator, you get to size up an enemy, which essentially marks them as a kind of prey. It gives you special bonuses to certain kinds of actions against the enemy, but more importantly, if you manage to size up an enemy before a combat starts, then you get this really cool action called Saw It Coming, which allows you to get a bonus to your circumstance bonus to your initiative roll. But in addition to this, as the battle starts, you get to either step, stride, or interact to draw a weapon as a free action. So your character is always ready. Your character is really good at nerfing enemies, giving your allies bonuses, and the Envoy is also split up into different leadership styles that give them unique abilities. One such one of these is Guns A-Blazing, which at 6th level, you get special bonuses whenever you make a range strike against an enemy that has a multi-attack penalty. That's for you, not for the enemy. That has either an area fire or auto fire feature, or reload an empty range weapon. This essentially gives you the benefits of your leadership ability, which is really solid. So overall, the Envoy is the go-to if you like playing a charismatic leader. You enjoy using guns specifically, as it's got a lot of very good gun-based actions within it as well. And if you just like nerfing the enemies and providing some team support. Now, the Mystic is next, and they are a very interesting caster. Now, they are a anything tradition caster, so based on what their connections are, they get to choose what kind of spell tradition they cast from, and they still use the same traditions as in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, so they're still primal, occult, and arcane, and divine. And in addition to these, you also get some unique features. One of them is the Mystic Bond feature, which allows you to connect with up to 10 other creatures. You're always considered within your own bond, and that doesn't take one of your slots. And you get to use some interesting actions, one of which is use of the Vitality Network, and more specifically, the Transfer Vitality action that allows you to transfer an amount of hit points to an ally who's bonded with you and within 60 feet. Now, one of the interesting things about this feature is this Vitality Network has an amount of HP equal to 6 plus 4 times your character level. Essentially, it's 4 per mystic level that you have. So it's 10 HP at level 1, which is already pretty substantial. And as a singular action, you can transfer any number of these points over. But one of the cool things about this is this amount of HP regenerates every turn. At the start of each of your combat turns, you restore 4, eventually going to 6, then 8 of these hit points. This is a really good way to add some extra healing, but you're not just like a cleric. You're not based on just a massive heal. This is a nice little extra. It can kind of help your allies weather the storm a little bit if you have an extra action left over, and you can provide some emergency healing to someone who goes down immediately, which is really good. And the fact that it regenerates is really good because when you have a cleric, you only get so many extra healing spells from your healing font, and while those are definitely way more powerful, they have a good chance of overhealing some of the times, especially if you're not using it when your allies are particularly low, which does lose some healing efficiency. Granted, it's still way more powerful than what the Mystic has going on here, but the Mystic can just keep it up over the course of the day much easier. But the Mystic isn't only about this extra healing feature. In fact, this Transfer Vitality ability gives special bonuses depending on what connection you have. With the Akashic connection, for instance, every time you use Vitality Transfer, the ally who receives this benefit can immediately attempt a Recall Knowledge action. This doesn't trigger any special abilities or reactions or free actions based on this Recall Knowledge, but still, this is a pretty good benefit, and each of the connections do offer something similar to this, meaning not only are you providing your allies with a little bit of healing, but sometimes giving extra actions or special buffs as well, making the Mystic a very interesting caster that is not just a heal bot and is different than any other casters we currently have in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Next up is the Operative, which is the go-to gunner class. You get like the aim action, for instance, that makes it easier for you to hit enemies who are in cover, and as well dealing additional precision damage every time you hit them with a ranged strike. And operatives have specializations, which are essentially their subclasses that allow them to operate in different kind of circumstances. The Ghost, for instance, is really good at assassinating people in crowded areas, having the Ghost Tap ability, which is a 2-action strike that you make on an enemy while you're currently hidden. You strike the enemy, and then you dip back into the crowd to hide again, potentially even getting a bonus to this check, depending on the circumstances, allowing you to potentially assassinate people out in the crowd. The Operative is one of the go-to gun-based classes, especially. It's incredibly powerful at range, and having all kinds of nice abilities for weaving in and out of combat, avoiding reactions to making range strikes in melee range, and all kinds of stuff. If you enjoy doing any kind of espionage, roguelike work, or you just really like guns, the Operative is probably going to be the one for you. Now, my favorite, the Solarian, is an incredibly cool class. It is a strength-based class that is kind of like a space champion in a way, but they're not defensive whatsoever, oftentimes being a lot more on the offensive side. They harness the light of the sun and the gravity of a black hole with their various photon-attuned and graviton-attuned actions. You essentially get several abilities based around the use of certain types of stances. Essentially, you can look at, you have attunements. So you have photon attuned, graviton attuned, or neutral, non-attuned, and you get special abilities in each of these kinds of stances. So all Solarians do have access to 3 main actions. They have Solar Shot, where they have this little mote of energy that floats around them that can shoot a laser, which is pretty cool. With the Solar Shot, that does something different depending on your current attunement. You have a Nimbus Surge, where you're surrounded by star stuff and solar energy that can help defend you when you're being struck. You take damage and then repulse an enemy or deal damage to them based on your current attunement, or your crafting of your solar weapon. Your solar weapon is a weapon that uses D8 damages, has 2 weapon traits from the trait table here or the reach trait, and is from a chosen weapon group. And you can actually spend an action to not an action. You can actually spend 10 minutes to reforge your solar weapon into a different weapon of your choice, which is pretty cool. So these features are all really, really cool, but then you have your Solarian arrangements. Your Solarian arrangements are essentially your subclasses, and they give you special bonuses based on your favorite attunement or lack of attunement, if we're talking about the balanced arrangement, for instance. And they provide you, skill increases, as well as some unique abilities. For instance, one of my favorite one from the Degradant Solarian arrangement, at level 9, you get Defy Gravity, which just allows you to fly as long as you're graviton attuned, which is really good. There's so many of these cool, interesting Solarian abilities, and I can't wait to go into it. It's going to be the first class I'm going to cover in a video. I'm probably going to work over the weekend to do some videos because I have some company coming over next week, so I'm going to try to get ahead of the schedule, put out some videos next week so we can see some of these cool ones. Solarian is going to be one of them, so be on the lookout for that video. Moving on to a very interesting class is the Soldier, and they are not what you would expect. They're not a Dex or Strength-based class. They are a Constitution-based class. Their whole thing is wielding heavy armor and even heavier weapons and devastating enemies with heavy suppressive fire. One of their main features is suppressing fire that allows them to, whenever they use an area fire or auto fire weapon, any enemy hit in that area becomes suppressed, giving them a -1 circumstance penalty to their attack rolls, in addition to a -10 penalty to their speeds. And considering that area fire is against class DC, typically, this means you don't actually need to have a really high dex to hit really well with your ranged weapons, as most of the time, enemies are going to take at least some damage and need to risk running out into the open to get away from your suppressive fire if they don't want to suffer any of the penalties. And thanks to their walking armory feature, they don't need to have a high strength to wear their heavy armors, allowing them to stat up their skills however they really want. Now, if you do have strength to match your armor, you do get additional bonuses, typically reducing the bulk the armor provides to your encumbrance, but still, you don't need to necessarily worry about that if you don't mind being a little bit slow, just relying completely on your constitution to do all the heavy lifting for you. And I think I failed to mention this, but they're also a 10 HP class, so Kineticist couldn't even match how much HP a soldier will have towards the end of the game. And the soldier fighting styles are their, subclasses that allow them to specialize in certain ways. And if you are someone who really does want to play just a melee character, well, we do have the close quarters style that does give you essentially a reactive strike. Now, the interesting thing here about Punitive Strike is when you hit the enemy, they become suppressed, meaning that they're going to take a -1 no matter what. And in addition to this, if it was a move action, as long as you hit, you immediately disrupt the action, allowing you to lock enemies down. That's insanely cool and makes you an intimidating frontline tank. Makes me really think of the Krogans from Mass Effect 3 with this general playstyle. I think it's really, really cool, and I think the soldiers are going to be a fascinating class to see in action. A lot of people have been very hyped about this one in particular. So if you like big guns, big armor, and just being an overall juggernaut, the soldier's probably going to be the one for you. And last but not least, we have the Witch Warper. So the Witch Warper, I would say, is most similar actually to a Sorcerer, probably being one of the more similar classes we have here, but they are very different. We don't have a blood magic to worry about, but we do have a paradox. So the paradox determines what spell tradition list you're using, which, yes, they are a multi-tradition spellcaster, which seems to be an ongoing trend. And it's, I think, something we're going to start seeing a lot more of from Paizo in the future. Hopefully means that a single tradition caster might get some better benefits for those types of spells than a multi-tradition. I'm honestly not sure. But the Witch Warper is very interesting because the Paradox not only provides you a skill bonus similar to how Blood Magic did before, and a list of granted spells, but more importantly, you get access to a quantum field effect. So all Witch Warpers have a quantum field, which they can drop out on the battlefield. It's a 15-foot burst they can put anywhere within 100 feet, and they have to sustain this warp reality action, but while it's out, they can use anchoring action. So each Witch Warper has an anchor that helps them get over certain types of conditions. For instance, like core memories, where your anchor is some kind of happy memory, something that kind of centers you, and its action, restorative recollection, allows you to get over things like the stunned condition, which is pretty cool. But they have many feats that also have this anchoring trait that they can only use while maintaining their quantum field. And as I already talked about before, the paradoxes give this quantum field a unique effect. Going back to Anomaly, for instance, any enemy within your quantum field is going to have to roll a DC 5 flat check anytime they use an action with the Concentrate trait, which is pretty cool. So you're maintaining this field the entire time. You're using your various anchoring abilities that might affect your quantum field specifically or affect yourself specifically, how your anchors do. And it's an interesting class. I'm very interested to see how the Witch Warper really does things moving forward. And it's definitely a class I'm planning on looking into a little bit more. But yeah, so that is Starfinder 2nd Edition. For Pathfinder players, it's going to play a lot the same. We're going to see a lot of the same kind of things, a lot of the same kind of skill feats and abilities, and I didn't mention it in this video, but it's probably something I'll cover later. They also gained new skills in this particular book that are way more combative, like dive for cover that allows you to dive, fall prone, and take cover on your turn, which this would be a feat. So you would see probably in a gunslinger. And just to see this be a skill feat, I think is really cool. I think we need more interesting skill actions in combat as well. This is another thing I plan on looking at in a future video, so stay tuned for that. But Starfinder 2nd Edition is a different type of game, and there's going to be some different types of balances. There is more flight, but there is also way more ranged combat, so flight isn't necessarily as much of an advantage. Some of the classes are very interesting, and some people are a little concerned about them being a little overtuned, and I'm going to state, again, you have to remember this is a playtest. Everyone needs to understand that some of these things might change if they are, in fact, overtuned, and so, temper your expectations, but this does open up so many opportunities for new types of Pathfinder campaigns, and Paizo is expecting a big mismatch of all types of Starfinder, Pathfinder-based campaigns that integrate the two systems well. So I'm definitely excited for a lot of this. A lot of the things I've seen here are really cool, and have given me some interesting ideas for our live play, a Plague Watch that we're going to be doing, which is a modern high sci-fi kind of setting, which I'm especially stoked because now we have more guns and more interesting things to implement into that campaign. I'm very, very excited for that. So if you want to see more on Starfinder content in general, I recommend giving this video a like and subscribing. And as well, if you find anyone else talking about Starfinder 2nd Edition, I implore you, go check their videos out and see if, what they are doing is good, and leave their video a like. The more we get people to like Starfinder 2E content, the more Starfinder 2E content we're all going to see, and hopefully other people on YouTube get to see as well. As I think Starfinder 2E is a excellent next step up for Paizo's general design, and they're going to be opening up a lot more doors for players to do even cooler and better things. So I'm super hyped for this one. I hope you're all hyped as well. But that's going to be it for me for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Good luck with your games. Leave the bad luck to me, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.